In this lesson, we're going to talk about the economic problem. What is the economic problem that every society faces? So every society faces limited resources and unlimited wants. So our economic problem is how are we going to allocate these limited resources for unlimited wants in production and consumption? That brings about three questions. What goods and services will be produced? How will the goods and services be produced? And who will receive or consume these goods and services? We'll start with what goods and services will be produced. So it's actually consumers that decide this. They influence what goods and services are going to be produced by choosing which goods and services to buy or consume. For example, when you choose to use a ride-sharing company like Uber or Lyft, you're sending a signal to those companies that you want more of this type of service. At the same time, you're sending a signal to vehicle manufacturers that you don't want to own a car. You would rather use a ride-sharing service. And so firms respond to consumer choices, preferences, and trends. So they pay attention to these signals, and then you may have more entrepreneurs enter the ride-sharing business and less the vehicle manufacturing business. What you may also see is that vehicle manufacturers will start partnering with ride-sharing firms in order to sell their vehicles to those companies. Or they may change their marketing strategy to make vehicle ownership seem more appealing. Another example of this is a change in the cameras that we use. So a long time ago, you couldn't see what your picture looked like until you went and had it developed on film. Then digital cameras entered the market, and you could see what your picture looked like. You could retake your picture 10 million times, and then you could decide which ones to print or not, and you could save them in digital form. You didn't have to have them printed out in order to save them. We also now use our phones, so the quality of the cameras in our phones has gotten increasingly better. Again, it's consumers that are influencing the goods and services by choosing to buy them. So more individuals were choosing to buy digital cameras, and film cameras became almost non-existent. Consumers also influenced phone manufacturers by choosing cell phones that had better cameras. So the quality of our cameras improved. So again, firms were responding to our choices, the preferences that we had, and the signals that we were sending them. The second question is, how will the goods and services be produced? So firms are making these decisions, but they're continuously being influenced more and more by consumers. So one example is a restaurant and the types of choices that they might make. So will ingredients be locally produced, or will they be shipped in from a more cost-effective producer? So this is something that a restaurant owner has to decide. And when they choose locally produced ingredients, that's something that they're going to advertise quite a bit so that they can see, is this something that consumers are interested in? And if consumers are choosing them and commending them for these locally produced ingredients, then restaurants will keep doing that, and even more restaurants will start to do that. On the other hand, if customers are more concerned with an inexpensive meal, then they may prefer restaurants that ship from a more cost-effective producer rather than ingredients that are locally produced. So restaurant owners have to pay attention to these trends. Which is the biggest concern for their customers? Is it having locally produced ingredients or having more cost-effective ingredients? Another example of this is, will customers place their orders with an employee or use a kiosk? So we have started seeing more and more kiosks at restaurants and also more online ordering options, which means that firms don't necessarily need to hire an employee specifically for taking orders. This decreases the labor cost for the firm, and at the same time, their customers may prefer placing online orders or using a kiosk. So again, this is a trend that firms will have to pay attention to. What are the preferences of their customers? Another thing firms have to contend with, especially manufacturing firms, is, will the firm produce everything in-house, or will they outsource some or all of the components? Now, the reason firms may choose to outsource some or all of their components is because there is maybe another company that can make these same components, but at a lower price, so it becomes more cost-effective, and they can then shift some of that cost savings to their customer. It may also be that the firm has found another company that makes these components more efficiently than they do. So again, for different reasons, firms will decide to produce things in-house and other things they may decide to outsource and have someone else make. Maybe they assemble it all themselves once they have all the components, or maybe they even get some other company to assemble it for them and they only sell the final finished product. So again, these are decisions the firm has to make. How are these goods and services going to be produced? And again, some of this may be influenced by their customer preferences. The third question is who will receive or consume the goods and services once they're produced? In most countries, and certainly in the US, the answer is whoever's willing and able to pay for these goods and services. So wealth is a large component to this answer. When someone has higher income and more wealth, then obviously they have more ability to purchase more goods and services than others. So in most countries, for most goods and services, it's going to be income and wealth that determines who gets these goods and services. Now, one thing it's important to note is that many people have a willingness to give up some of their ability to purchase goods and services and transfer that to others. According to the Giving USA 2020 report, in 2019, Americans gave $449.64 billion to charity. So that's billion with a B. So there is quite a large willingness to give up some of this purchasing power so that others can receive goods and services, despite maybe their lower level of income and wealth. There is also government intervention in most countries, including the US. So the US has a progressive or tiered tax system, which means that individuals with higher incomes get taxed at higher rates, and then individuals with lower incomes receive transfer payments, which allows them to purchase additional goods and services they wouldn't be able to purchase otherwise. So for the most part, it's wealth that determines who receives the goods and services, but at the same time, there are government interventions and there are charities that help individuals with lower incomes to increase their access to goods and services.